Hey there, Dan Horgan. It's so great to see you. And I've been looking forward to this because when I think about my experience with NSCS, you're always at the top of the list as someone that is a person who always says, yes, I can do that. I can do that. So, how in the world are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be with you and be a part of the podcast. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh no, it's going to be a great opportunity for our scholars to get some scholar scoop from somebody who I think has done so many incredible things already in your career. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But I was reflecting a little bit before we got on here. So I think we met back in like the late 90s, probably. So we go way back, Dan, which has been really
Absolutely.
nice. But one of the fondest memories that I have is when you got involved with NSCS and starting your chapter. One of the things that you also got involved with was the National Leadership Council, and you were a part of the very first NLC that we actually brought into existence. And I remember your focus on community service and how important that was. And I don't know if you remember this, but it was so meaningful. One of our members actually passed away during 9/11. She was on one of those planes that flew out of Boston, and she was a member of NSCS from Northeastern University. Her name was Candace Williams. Um, do you remember us building that playground in her honor?
I
Does that
do.
come back to you at all?
Absolutely. And I remember organizing chapter activities where we sent care packages to families who lost someone in 9/11. And it was just, one of those moments where you realize that you're part of something bigger than yourself. You're part of this community of people who really are genuinely interested, not just in succeeding individually on their own path, but really giving back to the community. And I thought that was always what drew me to NSCS, right? Because that's a core pillar of the work that we do.
Yeah, and I think, keeping that as the forefront of it, I feel like your whole life experience, at least from how I observe it, has always had an angle to it of wanting to help or wanting to go above and beyond to make a difference. Where does that come from, do you think? Like, where did you actually get that instilled in your kind of psyche?
I think I always reflect on this question because people ask me. I've volunteered for most of my life. I start my very first experience where I would say, like, I can recall the aha moment was when I was 11. I have two older brothers. Both of them were summer camp counselors at the YMCA. And it was the first summer that I was home by myself. And after the first day of that, I was like, yeah, this isn't fun. So
Right.
somehow I convinced my older brother to convince the camp director to let me come and volunteer at the camp. I didn't want to be a camper, even though the camp
Right.
was for 6 to 12-year-olds and I was 11.
Okay.
So he convinced her to let me work with the 6-year-olds. And specifically, I was connected to a little boy named Patrick who had Down syndrome.
Mhm.
And my job was to basically like be with Patrick. And I just remember, like, the long story, but like I saw how much joy this camp brought him, even though there were so many limitations that were being put on him. Like his parents, the camp counselors, like everybody was kind of like very protective of what Patrick would do. And I just remember observing how sad he would be if he saw everyone else playing kickball or engaging in some sort of activity that was maybe a high risk activity for him. And I remember one day I asked him, I said, "Do you want to get in the game?" And he didn't say no. He didn't say yes, but he just sort of looked at me and I could tell that he wanted to get in the game. And I said, well, I'll get in the game with you if you want. And we did it together and he was fine. And he loved it and he was laughing and he was getting so much joy out of it. And it just sort of like was the aha moment to me that oftentimes people around us are putting these limitations on us. But
Mhm.
if we dig in, we'll discover what we're truly capable of. And if we connect with the people around us that pull that out of us and help us get in the game, like we'll stay in the game and we'll keep
Right.
playing regardless of the outcome, right?
And I just think about that from the perspective of anyone that you're doing something like that for. They remember it
Yeah.
forever. Like it's a part of their life experience that they will never forget. And on your side of the equation, you also learn the things that you're really passionate about or
Yeah.
that you care about. And I know part of what you do a lot of is helping people think about their careers or getting into their career, being successful. But I've always said, like, people always say, do something that you're passionate about or find your passion or whatever. And the only way I think you can find your passion is you have to do stuff, right? You have to experience things. So when you're talking, maybe especially to students, what are some things that you tell them when they start thinking about their career or where they maybe want to go once they start winding down the college experience?
Absolutely. So I'll start with I have this quote that's been on my vision board next to my desk for like over a decade now, which is live life by design, not by default. And so I'll tell anybody who's sort of questioning, like, where do I go? How do I discover my quote unquote purpose, my passion? I say, you just have to live life by design, being intentional with the choices that you make, the
Mhm.
experiments that you embrace, right? Like,
Yep.
if you spark this strong sense of curiosity in your life and you're willing to play messy, right? Like
Yep.
create and try things you never tried before. And sometimes you're going to love it and sometimes you're not. But at least you have data now that helps inform the next decision. That's
Yep.
to me like what it's like to live by design. I think we get caught up by living in default, which is we sort of go through the motions, we stick with what's comfortable, we follow what everyone else around us is doing, whether that's online or offline. And I think that, again, if you're looking for your purpose, you're looking for your path forward, first do an inventory of the things you've done in the last 6 to 12 months that you've really enjoyed. Like what has
Hmm.
brought you so much joy, you feel fulfilled, you've leaned into, you've lost track of time doing. Take note of those things and then ask yourself in the next 6 to 12 months, how do I do more of those things? And
Hmm.
then ask others around you to support you, help you identify opportunities, unlock all those different things that you could get engaged in.
Do you ever find that some people seem to have an aversion to doing things that they truly enjoy? It's almost as if they have to make excuses to say, I really love doing this, but there's always a but. And it's like, why? Like, why wouldn't you commit yourself to finding those things that you love to do and
Yeah.
then try to spend the majority of your time doing those things?
Yeah.
And I find it all the time. Like people kind of want to apologize for things that they like to do. And it's like, well, no, you should do that as much as possible. And I do think college
Yeah.
students sometimes are caught up in the fact like that they have some preconceived notion of like, this is how things are supposed to go. And if I'm not doing it this way, I'm doing something wrong. But I don't think
Yeah.
there's a right or wrong answer to these things. It's all about experiences, or at least that's how I've come to a big conclusion about how do you get through this.
Exactly. I think that, a friend of mine says this all the time. He says, if you really want something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll
Hmm.
find an excuse. And I think that, when you start to hear somebody say an excuse, like, I want this, but, right?
Hmm.
I think if the people around that person can invite a strong sense of curiosity into the conversation by saying, okay, it sounds like you want it, but then you're sort of holding yourself back. What's getting in
Yep.
your way of pursuing the thing you're curious about? And sometimes it really gets down to like, I don't really want that, but I feel the pressure of the people around me pushing me in that direction. I work with a lot of
Yep.
young people who say things like, I love dance, but my parents want me to go into engineering, right? Like
Yep.
I come from a family of teachers. So my family wants me to be a teacher or a police officer, whatever it is, right? And I'm like, that sounds great for them. That's their
Yeah.
blueprint for success. But is that what you want? Is that what's going
Yep.
to fulfill you? And so many times, again, a lot of young people haven't taken the time with intentionality to connect with people in those paths. So
Yep.
ask people outside of your immediate circle, spend a day with them.
Mhm.
I remember
Yep.
early on when I was in high school, I really wanted to be a lawyer. I saw things on TV about what lawyers were like, and I was like, oh, I just love like defending somebody, helping to protect people, like all that. I spent a day with a lawyer and decided very quickly I did not want to be a lawyer. I was
Right,
like,
right.
but like I
Right.
can give back in other ways. I went to school to be a teacher, but I was
Mhm.
running programs in schools during the day and going to night class. And then I would come into classes and I would hear what professors were saying. And I'm like, that's not what I'm observing. That's not what I'm experiencing. So then I had some mentors who were teachers and administrators in education who said, being in the classroom is not the only way you can teach.
Mhm.
And it was again like a light bulb moment where it's like, that's so true. Like there's all
Right.
sorts of other ways that I can give my gift. And sometimes again, having the people around us show us our options. To
Yep.
me, that's what great mentorship, that's what great support systems look like in action.
Yeah, I think one of the things, that I've been discovering is the current group of students that we're working with have some residual carryover from the pandemic. And I'm curious about your experience right now with students who maybe kind of work their way through the pandemic and they're trying to figure things out in a different way.
Yeah.
What's your version of what's happening right now with the current group of students,
Yeah.
I
So I
guess?
think a lot of students, a lot of young people that we work with who've navigated through the pandemic. I think a couple of things. One is I observe there's sort of this opposite end of the spectrum in action. So there's a
Mhm.
group of young people who are like, I'm going to say yes to everything. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm an author, an entrepreneur, a speaker, a student. I build all these things, and I'm like, wow, it sounds like you like really know how to manage your time effectively. Like, how do you do all that? And you get
Well, it
into it,
sounds
and
like you're like, you sound like me. That's what
but I
when
don't
you're
ever
describing
remember
that person. Like,
exactly.
that's you.
But it's funny because I'll say things like, so like, what specifically are you doing? Right. So
Mhm.
that end of the spectrum, I feel like is I need the accolades, I need the titles in order to establish quote unquote my credibility, which is going to get my foot in the door and help me on my path. The
Yep.
other end of the spectrum is, I don't know what I want to do. I'm really nervous about saying yes to opportunities, putting myself in positions where I'm with people I don't know. And so I'm going to just stay where it's comfortable. And I
Mhm.
always try to encourage people to find the middle ground. Like, no one can successfully do everything, right? And
Right.
challenge yourself to really ask you, okay, so there's 5 or 6 things on your plate, prioritize them, rank them. Like, which ones are most aligned to the goals that you're trying to achieve in life? That's where I often see people break down is they haven't defined the goals. They've just taken on the responsibility or they've taken on the quote unquote titles that they think will unlock these new opportunities or give them a sense of status where
Yep.
they get noticed, they get recognized. I think on both sides, you see young people craving connection. And
Yep.
I think through the pandemic, people found it in different ways. But today, people are like, we need connection in order to, you know, unlock the opportunities in our careers, navigate our way through school, especially if you're a first gen student. Like, I need support. I need that system around me to help guide me in the way. But I also think you just need connection to be a healthy individual, a healthy human,
Right.
right? To feel accepted and connected to people around you.
Yeah, I think the idea of belonging is something that continues to come up in conversations. I think students want to belong to something, but there's a little anxiety around getting involved with it. It's the, I don't know how to do this, or I've never had enough experience to take on some responsibility. And I look at it from the context of chapter leadership for NSCS. It used to be back way back when you were involved, and even just before the pandemic, students would always be eager to become a chapter officer, take on the responsibility. It's like, this would be a great experience for me. Now it's a sense of, well, I don't know how to do that. I think I might fail. It's a little bit of that imposter syndrome. Like, I'm going to become a chapter officer, but I don't really have any experience to be able to do that. And
Yeah.
that's where I'm always like, well, that's the college experience overall. It's like
Yeah.
you get yourself involved in things where you get the experience. You
Yeah.
got to say yes to some things to then be able to say, I've done that before.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, I know you are probably involved on a lot of levels with like recruiters and people that are hiring these students. And, I'm curious about like, do you hear anything now from recruiters about what they're experiencing with students and what are some things that students could do better at when they walk into an interview with someone?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do a lot of work with recruiters through our partnership with SHRM. So we manage the mentorship programs for SHRM. And so I think a lot of recruiters are saying things like, we see the technical skills, we see the
Hmm.
certifications, the degrees, all of that on paper. But what we don't see is the skills in action. So you say you're a great communicator, but I'm having a hard time carrying on a conversation with you. You say that you're adaptable and flexible, resilient, but I'm not seeing you show me that as you work through this problem based interview question, right? And so
Right.
I think for a lot of our coaching, we say, it's one thing to have all the degrees and certifications and courses that you've taken. It's another thing to show the application of the learning. So,
Hmm.
and I think that's to your point. What I learned from being involved in a CS and taking on so many different student leadership roles was it was the ability to try new things, test and learn different ways of leading, and
Yep.
observe what works, what doesn't work in myself, but also in others, right? Like what felt good to me in the way that someone was leading. I
Yep.
remember in 1999 when I first met you, we went to this conference that you invited us to in DC. And like in between the conference, like there was a whole group of us and we just walked around DC because I had never been there. And you
Yep.
showed us like the monuments and you were showing us like the things in your hometown, right? And so to me, it was like, that's leadership in action that I really respect and appreciate
Yep.
because it was authentic, it was curious, it was about meeting me where I was. And I
Right.
see so many leaders today, similar to young people, frankly, that they feel like they have to have everything put together and they have to, come across perfect. And I'm like, be messy, right? Like, messy is
Right.
what makes you vulnerable. It's what makes people attracted to you and makes people want to be a part of your team because you're willing to experiment.
Yep. Something that I remember, I don't know if you'll remember this totally, but I struggled with this a little bit was when I had you come down to the University of Maryland to introduce Wendy Kopp at
Yep.
at an event, right? And I know at the time you had this huge ambition to be a part of the Teach for America Corps.
Yeah.
And I remember, when I picked Wendy up and I was like, oh, I'm so excited, you're going to get to meet Dan. And part of something that was it stuck with me because it was so like what, like, their approach to recruiting was really revolving around institutions. Like we like to recruit our students from these schools and we
Yeah.
don't really go outside of that regardless of who the person was.
Yeah.
I just remember like, but what about like Dan? Like he would be really great for this. And like how does that work sometimes when you have these ambitions to do something but you kind of start realizing that it may not work out. Like, how does that factor into someone's, life experience from like being disappointed, which
Yeah.
happens, right?
Yeah. I frame it so differently today than I did in that moment. Because, Steve, like that, I talk about that a lot, that experience. I
Hmm.
remember you invited me to introduce Wendy, and I was backstage and was talking to the recruiters that were with her. And the one recruiter literally said, I'll never forget it. Oh, we would never recruit at your school.
Hmm. Right.
And, to me, it was like an aha moment. The way I frame it today is, we navigate these experiences in our lives, and those experiences are designed to show us. I say the universe is giving you the answer, right? It's guiding you to where you are going to quote unquote belong and
Yep.
thrive.
Yep.
And if you pay attention to what the universe is telling you through other people's actions and words, you'll have sort of this compass to direct you to the spaces where people are going to support you, again, meet you where you are and help you to grow. If you're interviewing, for example, I say this all the time, don't ask, are there opportunities for growth? It's an easy answer that any hiring manager can say, of course, yeah, there's lots of things that you can take advantage of while you're here. I always say, ask the question, tell me about somebody on your team that you've developed over the last 6 months and how you've helped them to grow in their skills and experience.
Hmm.
And you'll get a very clear answer if they can give you a good response that they're going to be
Right.
somebody who's going to help you get to wherever you want to go in your goals. If they can't answer that question, it's a sign that this may not be the space where you're going to grow and develop.
Well, the good thing about that too, it's like I think sometimes people walk into an interview and they think the whole thing is about answering questions. But
Yep.
I think so many interviews turn out so much better when you take ownership as if I'm interviewing you. Like
Yeah.
I want to understand why I should become and be a part of your team or your company.
Yep.
And you have to reframe your approach to interviewing. So I think when you give people that advice, I think that's really incredible.
Yeah.
But again, it comes along with experience, right?
Yeah.
Like you had those experiences where you started to realize, I'm hearing that this isn't going to work out.
Yeah.
You do have to kind of take the moment to say, what am I learning from this? And what
Yeah.
does it actually mean? And I think sometimes it's still unfortunate, like when recruiters have an attitude around, we only recruit from these schools or whatever. I just think it's so limiting. And it's what I've always said about NSCS. Like we have like high achievers at almost 300 schools. And I think a lot of capable people, just because it's not on your list doesn't mean you shouldn't actually maybe talk to them, right?
Yeah.
I
100%.
make a little bit of progress there, but I think sometimes it just boils down to kind of ease or, people just don't want to change what they've been doing for a long time. But I keep
Absolutely.
chugging away at it because I'm the biggest advocate for like incredible students at so many schools, and I think companies are missing out on great talent just because they don't get beyond their "we've
Yeah.
always done it this way," you know?
And Steve, you'll know this about me. I've always been like an advocate for especially young people to be in rooms where decisions are being made about them or for them. And one thing, again, when it comes to interviewing, even if you're a high school student and you're going to college campuses and you're trying to figure out where you might want to go to school, if you can develop the practice of asking great questions, right?
Hmm.
Not asking surface level questions, but asking great questions that dig in around the values that are important to you or the things that you want from the experience.
Hmm.
Now, in order to do that, you have to take the time to reflect on what kind of college experience do I want? What do I think is going to be setting me up for success socially, in
Yep.
terms of my academics, in terms of where I want to go in my career, the types of, things that I want to experience, and then ask those questions, immerse yourself in the experience. So
Yep.
instead of just saying like, "Oh, are there student organizations on campus?" Ask like, "What was the most well-attended student organization activity on campus last year?" Right?
Hmm.
And you'll get a
Yep.
sense of the culture, what draws people to things at that campus. And then you ask yourself, like, would I fit that? Would that make me feel excited and engaged? Right? And I
Right.
think the same is true in the workplace. Ask those types of questions. Like, do informational interviews with 4 or 5 people outside of the team that you're interviewing with and look for the trends in their answers because that will
Hmm.
give you a good clue as to what the real culture is like day to day.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I think the more people take responsibility for, asking questions or digging a little bit deeper or just making connections. I was having a conversation recently with someone and they were like, you'd be surprised how many students never take much initiative to get to really know their professor. They
Mhm.
never go into the office hours. They never go after class just to have a conversation. And that's like a missed opportunity, right? To get to know the person that's, teaching you in ways that they could also maybe help you in other ways, like with their connections or people that they know. So
Absolutely.
it seems really short sighted, but I think the more we can encourage students to think about this, I hope it will help them at least find
Yeah,
their way to the opportunities that they need or are looking for.
absolutely. And I'll just add one quick thing for any, manager, professor, advisor who's listening to this.
Yeah.
I had been working last year with the head of people operations at McDonald's, and she said the most profound thing. She said, number one, we all talk about an open door policy, and we invite people in at all times and say, like, oh, if you have any feedback or any questions, always feel free to stop by my office or call me up, email me, whatever. She's like, we don't
Mm.
talk about the importance of balancing that with the other 50%, which is so critical, which is an open mind. We can have open door policies as professors and managers and advisors, but if we don't demonstrate and practice an open minded way of communicating, then we're not accessible, right? We're physically
Right.
there, but we're not accessible to the point where it makes it comfortable for someone who's questioning themselves or questioning their own questions to
Right.
feel like they can ask them and give breath to them. And I think that it's a responsibility on both sides. That's why a lot of the
Hmm.
work we do at Collabl is like we're supporting young talent, but we're also working with managers because a lot of these managers, they haven't been trained and haven't been coached on how to effectively lead teams. And if we can
Yep.
do it from both perspectives, they can meet each other in the middle and move forward towards a common set of goals.
Do you think it's like a smart idea or not? Like if a student or a person's going in to talk to a professor or a manager or an advisor and they're wanting to dig into something, if they started the conversation with like, I hope you'll have an open mind about this, or I'd like to talk to you about something that, I hope that you'll like really think about it. Like, does that help or does it not help when someone's trying to get a point across in some
I think
way?
it's great. I think it's a great piece of advice. I think the way you frame things, right? You'll
Hmm.
know right away if somebody's open to looking at things from a different angle, a different perspective, asking those types of questions, be like, hey, I've been battling in my head around these two ideas and weighing the pros and cons of both. Are you open to exploring both with me? Not pushing me in a direction. I say this all the time when we coach mentors and mentees. your power in that mentorship relationship is rooted in exploring your options, weighing the pros and cons of everything, and empowering the person whose decision it is to make the decision, not
Right.
to give them the blueprint or give them the instruction manual and set them on their way.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely something that I hope a lot of people will continue to think about in the way that they frame things up. I know we don't have a ton of time left. I would love to
Yeah.
talk to you forever. Two things there really quickly.
Yeah.
You may remember back in the beginning of NSCS, which, if you can believe it, like we're going into like our 32nd year, I think now, which is
Which is
crazy.
amazing.
It
Congratulations.
is amazing. It's really amazing. But I remember I used to talk about like a quote that my grandmother used to say all the time. And come to find out, it was like the Henry Ford quote, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
And, I know that you have two books now, so you're like an author, which is awesome. Um, I just remember the first one though, when I got it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is sort of my like mantra. It's the whole idea of like, tell me I can't and I will, right?
Yeah.
That's the title of your book.
Yeah.
So what in that title, like, could you summarize that just for a second? Like, what was the thing that you felt like you were told you couldn't do that really you wanted to prove that you would, or that you will get it done?
Yeah. I mean, the quick backstory is that book was written when my grandmother, she lived till 96, when she passed away. I was super close to my grandmother. And um, I took time off of work for about 3 weeks to write this book after she passed.
Hmm.
And it really was, to be honest, it was much more of a passion or sort of grieving project for me versus like wanting to write a book and get it out to the world.
Right.
And so much of what was rooted in it was the fact that my grandmother always said, like, if there's a will, there's a way, right?
Yep.
Like, you can figure it out, like, put your mind to it. She always encouraged me to write. She saw I think something in me where I was much more reflective as a younger person. Like, I didn't speak out in public a lot, right? Or speak
Right.
up in classes. I was the quiet kid that was just trying to do my work, get through. And she would always encourage me, like, use your writing as a channel of communications, of expressing yourself. And so this book, that was an opportunity for me to do that and say, I've been advocating for so many young people, and I want to spread the word more about what it means when someone says you can't do something, to challenge the status quo.
Yep.
Because oftentimes the reason they're telling you you can't do something is because they've bought into a narrative that may or may not be true. And
Yep.
so unless we question it, we won't evolve. And I think that's
Right.
the core sort of goal that I wanted to get across in it.
Well, it certainly resonated with me, and I think, the grandmother piece obviously does, because my grandmother was also a really a big part of my life experience, and I think the formative years of helping me look at how I frame things and how I want to kind of exist in my lifetime experience. So I did appreciate that, and the whole kind of meaning behind that is super special. So
Yeah.
that's the thing too. It's like these opportunities also keep people alive in a lot of ways. So,
Yeah.
you think this many years have passed, and we're both still talking about our grandmothers, which I think is
Absolutely.
such an important thing for legacy and whatnot.
Yeah.
So also, just so we can make sure everyone knows about it, like your new book is a little bit more of a guide for thriving, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll do everything we can to promote that to to all
Yeah.
of our people, so that they're hopefully chiming in on that too. So
Amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
the book is called We Got This. It's really a pocket guide to thriving in life and career. And the whole idea of it was, I spent the last 20 plus years coaching early career talent, people who are in school trying to navigate their way into career. And I've learned a ton from mentors and from leaders that I've worked alongside, organizations that we've been a part of. And it's like, how can I put this into a digestible tool that essentially is something that, you don't read from front to back. You
yep,
jump to the section that's most applicable to what you're trying to navigate. And you got this pocket guide that's going to help you think about, what are my options if I'm trying to make this decision? If I'm trying to
yep,
boost my confidence, navigate a difficult conversation, build my social network. And so that was really the catalyst. I've been mentoring a lot of people, and people are like, you should put all this into a book. And I was like, I could do that.
yeah,
So
and you did.
that's the goal.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I certainly will do everything I can to promote your book, because it definitely is a resource that's needed today. for all the reasons that we've talked about. And you've given out, so much good advice and so much good scholar scoop. So
Yeah,
thank you, Dan, for everything that you do and all the lives that you impact. It's really amazing. And I'm certainly so happy that you're a part of my life experience and for all the ways that you've supported NSCS and me over the years. So thank you for that.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'll just say in closing, Steve, too, I really appreciate we talked earlier about intentionality. You've always been through the years super intentional about not just building, but managing relationships with those that you've networked and connected with. And so I think that's, again, just another example of your leadership in action that I really appreciate and try to emulate in the work that we do. That story I shared from the very beginning when you walked us around DC, like you're
Hmm.
still practicing that. So I would encourage everyone who's listening, again, regardless of whether you're in high school, college, you're an advisor, or out in the work world as a manager, like be intentional with how you're not just building connections, but managing those connections because you just never know how they're impacting you personally, but also how they're rippling out, impacting others around you too through your words and actions. So I appreciate you.
Oh, oh, thank you so much for that. And I look forward to doing this again with you sometime soon.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.